Thank you for sitting down with me today. I really appreciate it. Kind of starting off light, what's something most people would be surprised to learn about you?
Most people tell me that they're surprised to learn that I've got a sense of humor.
Hmm.
My sister says that's the thing that most surprises people, but
Right.
I come from a big family. I like what Abraham Lincoln said, Andrew, that you should take your job seriously, but don't take yourself in your job too seriously. And I've had some serious jobs in my life here in Indiana and serving the nation, but I've always tried to have a sense of humor, and it's pretty easy to do when you got a family like mine.
Mm-hmm. What's the most memorable experience you had during your time serving as vice president?
I don't think anything can compare to the day that I was sworn in as vice president of the United States. I have to tell you, my grandfather immigrated to this country from Ireland.
Mm-hmm.
He got off a boat on what used to be known as Ellis Island, where immigrants would pass through just off New York City. And he drove a bus for 40 years in Chicago, Illinois. I was named after him. His name was Richard Michael Cawley. I'm Michael Richard Pence. But to think in the expanse of 2 generations, that the grandson and namesake of that Irish immigrant who came to this country without 2 nickels to rub together would be able to stand up on a platform, put my left hand on my Bible and raise my right hand, take the oath of office to serve in the second highest office in the land was an extraordinary privilege for me, and one that was, to me, was evidence of my family's love, their belief in me and in our shared values, but also just God's grace in my life to have given us the opportunity to serve.
Yeah. Looking back at your time as vice president, what's one leadership lesson you learned that you think young people today should carry with them into any career or calling?
Well, I'm a big believer. Look, I was governor of Indiana, which is you're the chief executive of the state. I was a legislator, which is served in Congress, and that's the kind of leadership where you have to work with lots of different people. But being the second in charge in an administration in Washington, D.C., I tried to apply principles of leadership that reflected humility and what I call orientation to authority. For most of us, and you included, Andrew, when you finish up college and go out in the world, you're not going to start your career in the top position. And so learning how to serve, to bring a servant's attitude, to bring humility, to reflect and respect the authority that's above you is the way you build relationships. And I hope as people look at our record and our career during the Trump-Pence administration, they can see the evidence of a good team. The president and I had a great working relationship for 4.5 years. It didn't end the way I wanted it to, but I'm incredibly proud of that record. And I think it was greatly facilitated by me putting into practice those timeless principles of servant leadership that made that relationship work.
Yeah. What's a day in the life as a vice president really like? Something that most people wouldn't really expect.
Well, the vice president lives in a building called the Naval Observatory. It's about 10 minutes without traffic to the White House every morning. But I would invariably start fairly early. I'd get through about 5 or 6 major newspapers, go online, check what was happening. And then, while on many days the president and I would both receive the presidential daily brief from the intelligence community officials assigned to the White House, I would almost invariably get my briefing first, so that by the time I was joined the president, I would have had time to reflect on it, reflect on the things that I thought he might be most interested in learning more about. And so I would get a briefing at the Naval Observatory itself, then climb in the motorcade, drive downtown, begin my meetings with my team and my staff before the president would call me down to the Oval Office. And we'd start our briefing together, but then in the course of the day, I would virtually attend every meeting that the president held. at the White House, apart from personal meetings. It was the nature of the relationship that we had. I think I was in office about a week when I saw something on the president's schedule, Andrew, and he and I would talk on the phone every day in the course of the campaign, and then when we were elected. But I said to him, hey, I saw you've got a meeting on this afternoon. I said, I have a lot of background in that area. I'd be happy to attend. And he kind of got quiet for a second, and he said, you'd be happy to attend? And I said, yeah, I mean, if it'd be appropriate, I'd be happy to sit in on the meeting. And he just said to me, yes, everything. And I said, everything? And he goes, well, Mike, if you're in the White House when I'm having a meeting, I want you there, unless you've got something else pressing. And that was how we functioned. I'd probably spend about 4 hours a day in the Oval Office in one meeting after another, always sitting just to the right hand of the president off the Resolute desk, while one group after another would come in. We'd talk about issues, bills we're trying to pass in the Congress, issues affecting the country, our efforts to secure the border, which I'm happy the president has reinstituted the policies that we had in effect. But generally speaking, it would, the day would wind out sometime around 7 o'clock or so. And if there was a function that we had to attend, either somewhere around the country or in Washington, D.C., we'd do that. But unlike the president, I'm someone who needs a little bit of sleep every night. He actually,
he barely sleeps.
He doesn't need a lot of sleep, as near as I can tell. But I'd usually try and get down by 11 o'clock or so, and then start it all over again in the morning.
You mentioned being at the right hand of President Trump and getting into the Escalades and other stuff like that with motorcades and whatnot. Was there ever a moment at your time at the White House or in Washington, D.C. that you're like, wow, I can't really believe that I'm actually here right now doing this?
Well, I'm not sure there was ever a moment I didn't feel that way. I mean, it was an incredible privilege. I'm just a small town guy from southern Indiana. I didn't grow up in a political family, Andrew. You come from a great family. But my dad ran gas stations. My mother was a first-generation American. But I was inspired by the example of President John F. Kennedy and Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. And I just got it in my head that public service was my calling. And God honored that along the way in my life through a lot of lessons learned. But the very idea that I could serve in the second highest office in the land was an incredible privilege. I mark today the sad news we all woke up to, the passing of Pope Francis. And I came to a personal faith in Christ when I was in college, and I'd really walked away from the faith of my youth. But growing up, I was in a strong Catholic family. I was an altar boy, and so that was one of those moments I was thinking about today, where I literally got to spend an hour one-on-one with Pope Francis, where we talked about the right to life, his devotion to that. We talked about issues facing the world, and he did give me a rosary to give to my mother, which I promptly delivered when I got home. But that was one of those experiences I never thought I'd have growing up, a little boy in Columbus, Indiana. And I honestly don't think there was a day that went by that I didn't count it a privilege to be Vice President of the United States.
Yes. What values do you think are most important for the next generation of leaders, regardless of their politics?
Well, I think being men and women of integrity. I mean, taking this time in your life to grow in the qualities of the inner man and the inner woman that are going to serve you, whether you're leading a family, whether you're leading a business, whether you're leading a great school like Carmel High School, whether you're leading a city, state, or a nation. Everything, in my judgment, begins with character. People follow people that they trust. And so at this time in your life, I'd say spend time. For me, it all begins with faith. Spend time nurturing those qualities of character that people you admire evidence and live out. For me, it does begin with Jesus Christ, who said, I came not to be served, but to serve, and servant leadership, is something, whatever your faith tradition can inspire. And the second thing I would say to young people is study America. Study the American founding. Understand that the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution of the United States are the two most significant and impactful governing documents in the history of the world. Created the freest and most prosperous nation in history. And it wasn't an accident. It was the ideals and principles, the ideals in the Declaration, but the principles enshrined in that Constitution that made that possible. And so I would say to young people, grow in your character as men and women of integrity. But if you have any desire in your heart someday, whether it's to serve in the military, to serve in law enforcement, to serve in elected or appointed office, study America and study the principles that have made America so unique and so exceptional. And then you'll be ready to lead.
Yep. Who's been the most influential person in your life, and what is one lesson that they taught you that has stuck with you?
Well, I mean, apart from my relationship with God, in my faith in Jesus Christ, the most influential person in my life was my dad. My dad left us suddenly when I was 29 years old, but he's still the best man I ever knew. He was a combat veteran in the Korean War, and some of us in our family think that he raised me and my three brothers like he was running a platoon. But my dad was a man of faith. He built, I like to say, everything that matters. A family, a business, and a good name. And Ed Pence to me is always going to be that person that had the greatest influence on me in my life, and frankly still does. Because, a good parent never really leaves you.
You met a lot of people across the country. Is there one interaction with an everyday American that really stuck with you?
More than I could really count.
Yeah.
And I consider myself an everyday American.
Yeah.
I do. But for me, it was always it was always those moments in between you go give a good speech, or before you go back to the motorcade, where you can stop and take time and speak. And I will tell you, it's one of President Trump's virtues as well. I would see him spend as much time engaged with the guy operating the freight elevator at a hotel as he would with the head of state that we were going to meet. And I think he understood, coming from that background of a developer and a builder, that there's an awful lot of wisdom and good judgment and insight talking to people that are out there making America happen. And I had that experience as well, more times than I could count.
What advice would you give to someone who wants to serve in politics but is hesitant because of today's political climate?
My advice is get over the hesitation. This is a great country, and the future of this country depends on men and women of integrity stepping forward and taking responsibility in elected or appointed positions, putting on a uniform of law enforcement, putting on the uniform of the United States. My son's a major in the Marine Corps. My son-in-law is a lieutenant in the Navy. We're incredibly proud of them. My youngest daughter's in public service as well. But whatever it is, I would just say, is there tension and difficulty if you're going to step into a leadership role? Sure. I mean, President John F. Kennedy said to lead is to be misunderstood. But I have to tell you that for me personally, whatever challenges came with it, the privilege of being able to serve my hometown in Congress, to serve Indiana as governor, and to serve as vice president were the greatest honors of my life. And the opportunity to do that eclipsed any of the difficulty or hardship or criticism that came with it.
Is there something that you wish you would have known at the start of the career that you more so know now?
I do. You know, I wrote an autobiography that I've got to get you a copy of.
My next question's about that.
It's entitled "So Help Me God."
Yes.
It's my first book. And, you know, I've mentioned that I came to faith in Christ when I was in college. It's a little bit older than you are right now. I'd walked away from religion entirely before then. But I heard the gospel presented at a Christian music festival at Asbury University in Wilmore, Kentucky, and prayed to receive Christ. I'd been interested in politics all of my youth. I thought that government was going to be my calling. But after I came to faith, I began to do too often what people tend to do, and that is you look at your personal life and faith in your life. But in my first few campaigns, and long before you were born, I decided that I needed to reflect the same rough and tumble negative politics of the people I was running against to be able to be successful. And I not only lost a couple of my first two races for office, but I ended up losing a lot of self-respect. It'd be 10 years later, Andrew, before I'd have an opportunity to run again. And I remember when it came back around, I had decided, you know, if I ever had the chance to run again, to pursue that heart's desire and that calling in my life, I was going to do it in a way that first honored God, informed the debate, treated others the way I wanted to be treated, and then was about winning in a good debate on issues. You know, I think democracy depends on heavy doses of civility. I wish I'd known that earlier on. I wish I'd known that you can actually conduct yourself in a way that's respectful to your opponent and still argue. But the point is, Andrew, I can say you're wrong without saying you're a bad person.
Yeah.
And I love to debate people. Anybody who tell you that ever served with me knows I love a good debate on issues. I'm pro-life. I don't apologize for it. I believe in limited government, the Constitution, strong defense, American leadership in the world, and a lot of people, even in my own party, that differ on those things. I think you can have those debates without the personal attacks. I tried to emulate that throughout my 20 years, but I wish I'd learned that lesson a little bit earlier.
Yeah. So going off your book that you just mentioned, you and your daughter also published a book, Go Home for Dinner, Advice on How Faith Makes a Family and a Family Makes a Life. And then also your personal memoirs that you mentioned, So Help Me God. For someone picking up one of these books for the first time, what is one message that you hope they walk away with, and how did faith play a big role in your life and staying grounded at your time during Washington mostly?
Well, the second book, I love, the biggest lesson from the first book, I hope, is what I just shared a bit.
Yeah.
Is I hope that when people read my life story, they'll see that I'm a guy that I had some lessons to learn, even after I'd come to faith. And frankly, Andrew, I'm still learning lessons. A long time after I started my walk in faith. And I'm sure I will continue to learn till the day that I pass away. But in the second book, it was all about how I believe that if a family can not only survive in politics, but can thrive, but you have to make choices along the way. And that's true not just in politics, but you know, you come from a great family. And I would tell you that whether you're running a business, whether you're running the city government, whether you're running a school, you have to make decisions about keeping your marriage and your family first, even in the midst of a busy life. And there's some practical ways to do that. And the title of the book comes from advice I used to give other members of Congress. I'd gotten some notoriety in Congress, so some of these young conservatives would come and find me right after they were elected and say, "What advice do you have?" And I'd always say, "Just vote right and go home for dinner." And they'd say, "What do you mean?" I said, "Well, just do what you told people you'd do if you ever got here. And then put your family first." I mean, for Karen and me, it meant keeping our family close, keeping our family together as we served. We had homes in Indiana and in Washington, D.C., where we kept our family together during the school year and spent summers at home in Indiana. But I'm just a real believer that strong families make strong communities, strong communities make a strong nation. And so, but if as I say in the book, you don't have to choose between a life in public service and living out a priority of your family and faith. But you do have to make choices along the way that affirm that. And however imperfectly, I think with the great help of my incredible wife, Karen, we managed to find that balance. And to this day, we enjoy a wonderful relationship with our kids who are all thriving, successful careers, 4 grandchildren, and we're blessed in every way that matters.
Yeah. Lastly, I just want to ask, where do you see America standing in 5 years?
I see America with a boundless future because I have faith in God, who I think has ever guided this nation. And almost as much after my years as a governor and a congressman and as vice president, I have boundless faith in the American people. I mean, we get off track sometimes, and sometimes we don't get off the wrong track soon enough. But that principle that we created this nation to form a more perfect union is something the American people have worked toward, fought through, strived toward, and I have every confidence that as we see widening challenges abroad, as we see hardship here at home for many Americans, as we see difficulties in our states and our communities, that the American people are going to step forward. And they're going to demand leadership as good as our people. I mean, make no mistake about it, Andrew. And I can tell you that having been downrange with soldiers deployed around the world, having stood with families in hurricane-destroyed neighborhoods where the floodwaters rose and winds blew and families were destroyed, and I've seen the generosity and goodness and resilience and faith and courage of the American people up close and personal. And I know that the people of this country are going to demand that we have government as good as our people someday, and I'm going to continue to be a voice in that and do my part wherever the good Lord leads.
Well, I just want to thank you for coming in today, taking time out of your busy schedule to sit down with me for this interview. I really appreciate it, Mr. Pence.
Thank you, Andrew.
Thank you for your time.
Good to be with you.
You too.